Some killers hide. They blend in. They smile at neighbors. They pass unnoticed in crowds. But the men in tonight's video did the opposite. They carved their darkness into their own skin. Skulls stretched across faces, swastikas inked on foreheads, horns surgically implanted, symbols of gods, demons, and death. Their faces weren't disguises, they were declarations. And when the violence came, no one could say they weren't warned. This is Marked for Murder. 5 killers who wore their evil on their skin.
The first thing anyone noticed was his face. A cracked skull stretched from forehead to chin, a cross inked between his eyes, dark, jagged shading that made him look inhuman, skeletal, like a warning carved in flesh. His name was Christopher McDonald. Born around 1992 in Texas, McDonald grew up alongside his brother Sean in a chaotic, unstable household. From early on, erratic behavior, untreated mental health issues, a fixation on control and dominance. He told people he was God. Friends called him Skeletor. His tattoos weren't decoration, they were a manifesto. By 2020, whatever had been building inside him was ready to explode. November 26, 2020. Before dawn, McDonald, his brother Sean, and Sean's wife Kaylee Lewis climbed into a vehicle in Las Vegas. What followed was a mobile mass shooting stretching across 2 states. They fired at random motorists, strangers at gas stations, anyone who crossed their path. Eric Mineola was killed at a convenience store while standing with his girlfriend. Another survivor, Eric Spangler, would later describe the shooter as Skeletor, the skull face, impossible to forget. A mother and her 2-year-old daughter were threatened at gunpoint, but miraculously spared. The group continued north into Arizona, shooting at more vehicles, striking a police officer, until their car finally crashed near Parker, Arizona. Authorities described the spree as methodical yet frenzied, a terrifying mix of control, delusion, and impulsivity. McDonald was arrested at the scene. In 2021, he was deemed mentally unfit for trial. By 2022, he was restored to competency. In October 2024, he pleaded guilty but mentally ill to 23 felony charges, including first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, multiple attempted murders, discharging firearms at occupied vehicles, felon in possession of firearms. On December 13, 2024, Judge Tiara Jones sentenced him to life in prison with parole eligibility in 2120, effectively forever. In court, McDonald said, "I take full responsibility for my wrongdoing." His brother Sean still faces the death penalty. Kaylee Lewis awaits sentencing. But Christopher McDonald's face, that cracked, tattooed skull, will remain seared into the memories of everyone who survived that November morning.
Before he ever killed anyone, Wade Stephen Wilson looked like a nightmare. Swastikas etched across his throat, "Bred for War" inked along his neck, "Ha ha" beneath his eye, skull patterns across his cheeks, stitched lines over his lips, and on the side of his head, "Why so serious?" By the time investigators met him, he looked less like a man and more like a mask he'd spent years building. Wilson grew up drifting between trouble and violence, burglary, theft, fights that escalated without warning. People described him as unpredictable, unstable, sometimes charming, sometimes frighteningly detached. He joked about darkness. He played with personas. And as the tattoos multiplied, so did the behavior. Erratic outbursts, threats, a fascination with dominance. By October 2019, he was spiraling fast. Christine Melton, 35, was soft-spoken and kind. She lived alone in Cape Coral, Florida, trying to rebuild her life after difficult years. Diane Ruiz, 43, was a mother, determined and resilient, someone who never gave up. Neither woman knew Wade Wilson. Neither had any reason to fear him. On the night of October 6-7, 2019, both women crossed his path. By morning, both were dead. When Christine didn't show up for work, her coworkers immediately knew something was wrong. Diane was reported missing almost simultaneously, last seen walking near her home. Detectives traced movements, pulled footage, ran phone records, and one name kept surfacing: Wade Wilson. His father received a call from him that night, a call disturbing enough that his father immediately contacted police. What followed was fast: an arrest, an interrogation, evidence tying Wilson to both women's final hours. In 2024, Wilson stood trial in Lee County, Florida. His face, now almost entirely drowned in ink, was covered in makeup each day to hide the swastikas. But nothing could hide what he'd done. Prosecutors walked the jury through the timeline, the phone records, the statements that didn't match, the inconsistencies, the moments investigators pieced together. Wilson showed no emotion, no remorse, no understanding of the devastation he'd caused. The jury recommended death. On August 27, 2024, the sentence was made official. Wade Stephen Wilson was condemned to die by lethal injection. Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, two names spoken with reverence in that courtroom, while the defendant sat motionless, almost indifferent. His face told the world who he was. Nobody listened until it was too late.
The camera opens on a face marked by scars, carvings, and symbols. A man who insisted every line in his skin was commanded by an ancient Egyptian serpent god. His name was Nico Allen Jenkins, and in the summer of 2013, he walked out of prison after 10 years inside. Omaha had no idea what was coming. Jenkins grew up in a family already splintering: crime, instability, violence as a constant. By 15, he was carjacking strangers. By 17, he was facing decades for armed robbery and assaults committed inside prison. Prison didn't quiet him. It sharpened him. Isolation. Disciplinary records filled with attacks. Psych evaluations warning he was dangerous, unstable, unpredictable. 10.5 years served, and still, on July 30th, 2013, he was released. Free, unsupervised, despite every warning. Within days, Jenkins began speaking openly about commands, voices, prophecies, a serpent god he called Apophis. He carved symbols into his forehead. He talked about omens. And then the killings began. August 11th, 2013. Juan Uribe Peña, 27, walking alone near a home in North Omaha, shot in the head with a shotgun. Less than 2 hours later, Jorge Caiga Ruiz, 22, standing outside an apartment to smoke. Same weapon, same method. 2 men, 2 miles apart, one night. August 17, 2013. Andrea Kruger, 19, leaving her nightclub shift. Her body found later that morning near the Platte River. Another shotgun execution. August 21, 2013. Curtis Bradford, 34, shot inside a North Omaha apartment while playing video games. No struggle, no noise, just a cold, clean kill. 4 murders, 3 weeks. Every slug traced to the same weapon. Meanwhile, Jenkins was online, posting bizarre threats to police, speaking in riddles, warning that the beast was coming. Detectives followed the shells. Every slug matched ammunition Jenkins had bought on camera at a Walmart. Timestamps, ballistics, surveillance, every piece slid into place. Then came the confession. not to police, but to the world. In videos and phone calls, Jenkins claimed the murders were sacrifices ordered by Apophis. He was arrested on August 29, 2013. In court, Jenkins insisted on representing himself. He stood with carvings on his face, speaking in tongues, delivering rambling monologues about Egyptian gods, curses, and divine instruction. He intimidated witnesses. He filed lawsuits, including a $24.5 million claim against Nebraska for releasing him. He demanded death, then contradicted himself moments later. In April 2014, he was found guilty on all counts. In 2017, a 3-judge panel sentenced him to 4 consecutive death sentences, plus 450 years for weapons charges. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld the sentence in 2020. Today, Nico Allen Jenkins remains on Nebraska's death row, one of the most volatile, controversial, and psychologically complex criminals in the state's history. A man who walked out of prison after a decade and left 4 people dead within 24 days.
His face is a map of obsession, his hands, instruments of horror. Jaime Osuna left a trail that no one could unsee. Born around 1988 in Bakersfield, California, Osuna's childhood was marked by abuse, physical, emotional, relentless. Early brain damage later cited in court, a quiet, withdrawn demeanor that masked something darker. Methamphetamine became his companion, tattoos his armor, violence his language. November 2011, Yvette Pena, 37, checked into the El Morocco Motel in Bakersfield. She didn't know that Jaime Osuna was already stalking the shadows. What happened inside that room wasn't just murder. It was torture. Calculated, deliberate, prolonged. Investigators would later describe the scene as one of the most disturbing they'd ever processed. Osuna was eventually caught. He pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. His sentence? Life without parole. 6 charges: murder, attempted murder, torture, assault with a deadly weapon, making threats, dissuading a witness. Bakersfield breathed a sigh of relief, but for those who thought the story ended there, they were wrong. March 2019. California State Prison, Corcoran. Osuna's cellmate was Luis Romero, 44, also serving a life sentence for murder. Putting Romero in Osuna's cell was a catastrophic mistake. On the night of March 8, 2019, Osuna attacked. The details of what he did are so extreme that correctional officers who found Romero's body were left traumatized. Decapitation, mutilation, body parts removed. The body posed almost theatrically. Some guards later said Osuna was wearing pieces of Romero when they arrived. He was charged again. Murder, torture, mayhem. Eligible for the death penalty. But in 2021, he was declared incompetent to stand trial. A man beyond the reach of justice, or a system struggling to confront true evil. Every tattoo tells a story. Joker smiles at the corners of his lips. Pentagrams on his forehead. Cryptic symbols sprawling across his skin. He admitted it. No remorse, no sympathy. He enjoyed the fear, the pain, the control. Today, Jaime Osuna remains behind bars, a living enigma. A man whose history, choices, and crimes leave an indelible mark on everyone who survived him, everyone who loved his victims, and everyone who tried to understand how someone becomes what he became.
He walked into the courtroom with horn implants rising from his forehead, 666 etched above his eye, a name chosen from the shadows of Roman mythology, Caius Domitius Viovis. People stared at his face, investigators stared at his file, and the question echoed through Massachusetts. Was this man a monster, or did he simply look like one? Before the trial, before the headlines, before the tattoos became symbols the public feared, he was Roy Gutfinski, Jr., a kid from Maine who slipped away from ordinary life and into a world of rituals, subcultures, and rebellion. He reinvented himself piece by piece. A name change, horn implants, scarification, tattoos carved with intent. Friends said he was fascinated with mythology and darker imagery, not for shock, he claimed, but for identity. By his early 20s, he was already known to police, assault cases, a reputation for theatrics and danger. But in 2011, he would be pulled into something far bigger than a personal persona. Adam Lee Hall was a member of the Hells Angels, already under indictment, already preparing to face witnesses who could put him away. Witnesses became targets. Prosecutors said Hall needed people he could trust, people he could control, people willing to walk into darkness with him. They claimed he found that in Viovis. But Viovis insisted he was dragged into a story he didn't write, a pawn chosen because of his appearance, because he looked like the villain. August 2011. 3 men connected by circumstance. David Glasser, Edward Frampton, Robert Chadwell, all connected to upcoming testimony against the Hells Angels. One night, they disappeared. No signs of struggle, no frantic calls, just silence. Days later, their remains were found on private land linked to Adam Lee Hall. Phone records placed key players together. Witnesses whispered about late-night meetings. Surveillance footage captured fragments. 3 names emerged. Hall, another accomplice, Viovis. Viovis denied everything. He insisted he had no role in planning, taking, or harming anyone. He said his face, his horns, his ink made him an easy target. But investigators felt the puzzle formed a complete picture. In 2014, Viovis stood trial alongside his co-defendants. The prosecution painted him as a willing accomplice, a man drawn to violence, loyal to Hall, part of a plan to silence witnesses forever. The defense argued the opposite. No direct evidence tying him to the acts, only association and appearance. But testimony stacked up. Minutes became hours. Hours became weeks. Then the verdict. Guilty on all counts. 3 murders, 3 kidnappings, 3 acts of witness intimidation. Sentence: life without the possibility of parole. As deputies led him away, Viovis shouted to cameras, "I am the wrong guy." But for the families of the victims, justice had finally caught up with the story. Today, Caius Viovis remains behind bars in Massachusetts, still denying involvement, still insisting he was profiled for the way he looked, not the evidence presented. Some see him as a symbol of evil, others a symbol of misjudgment, a man who embraced darkness, then claimed it wasn't his own. But one thing is certain. The case of Caius Viovis endures because it forces a question that haunts every courtroom, every jury, every investigator. How much of a person's story is written on their skin, and how much lies deeper in choices, alliances, and truths the tattoos can't explain?
Christopher McDonald, Wade Stephen Wilson, Nico Jenkins, Jaime Osuna, Caius Viovis. 5 men, 5 faces that warned the world. Skulls stretched across skin, swastikas and 666, horns surgically implanted, symbols of gods, demons, and death. Each one built an image of darkness and then lived up to it. Some carved their evil slowly, others seemed born into it. But all of them made a choice to become something the world would fear. And when the violence finally came, the tattoos weren't just decoration. They were evidence, not of guilt, but of intent, of identity, of a path chosen long before the first victim ever crossed their path. For the families left behind, there are no answers in ink, only grief, only questions, only the memory of someone they loved, taken by a man whose face said everything and nothing at the same time. If you're still watching, you're not here for shock. You're here to understand how someone becomes this. If you want more deep dive breakdowns of real cases like these, subscribe to the channel, like this video so more people see it, and tell me in the comments, which of these cases disturbed you the most, and do you think the tattoos told the truth or hid it? Thanks for watching. Stay aware, stay safe, and remember, some warnings are written on paper, some are written in ink, and some are carved directly into flesh.